Beloved friends, torchbearers of the temple, firstborn, sons and daughters of God. Today we enter into the charge of light that is known as the Great, Great Silence. Our purpose is not to escape this world, to forfeit our physical body or our worldly affairs, and to discover a dubious form of temporary freedom that allows us to lift out of this world, leaving behind our unfinished work and all of the chaos and turmoil of this world, only to have to re-enter it again. Our purpose is rather to open our hearts and consciousness so that the light, the power, the substance, the presence of this great silence can actually saturate first our own personal cup of consciousness, and then rippling out, encircle our every person and place and condition, karmic and otherwise, that in any way affects us or our loved ones, and continue to ripple out concentric rings of fire until it encompasses the entire planetary body with the great, deep and glorious peace of the beloved presence. If you have not yet, you will come to discover that this charge of peace and of the great silence is a necessary foundation for the building of a permanent life of perfection and God consciousness. We are going to examine side by side the contrasts that exist between the realms of perfection and the dubious outer world that we are obligated to move through, and to assist you in understanding how you can actually bring the power of this light to bear in all of your affairs, and wherever the great law will allow, to let the cup of that peace overflowing your own personal world to flow out and to bless all of life as well. If you have not yet realized it, the foundation of this silence, this charge of divine peace, is absolutely a prerequisite for the perfection that you would outpicture to come forth. It is a prerequisite for the way in which God creates, which is the only lawful way open to those who aspire to their ascension. It's the only lawful way of problem solving, which is open to all of us. The good news is to be found in the realization of the greater power of this magnificent silence of the light, presence of the light, to actually take its dominion and overpower all exterior forces, no matter how daunting and overwhelming they might seem to be. So let us, for a little while, then contrast these two states of affairs. As you personally share the consciousness of your own Holy Christ presence, there will blossom within your world an innate awareness of your own beloved mighty I Am presence. This is not something that you will have to labor for, not something that you mortally will have to contrive. It is rather the natural state of the consciousness of your Christ presence. For your Christ presence is inextricably and indelibly at one with the source that has sent it forth, namely the electronic body of your mighty I Am presence. Now, even as your own Christ presence has this awareness of your beloved mighty I Am presence, if you can understand that, then you can also understand what you have to look forward to as you are able to rise in attunement to actually share the awareness of your own beloved mighty I Am presence, the awareness of your God self. This is a wonderful key to realize that even now, your own individual mighty I Am presence is holding connection and a conscious awareness with a part of life that human beings are insensitive to. They are blind to it. But when you share the consciousness of your own individual mighty I Am presence, lo and behold, you discover something that has always been there in life, unbeknownst to your outer awareness. And that is that there is a very real, tangible, loving heart of the great presence that we call the One, the great and universal I Am that I am. Follow this for just a few moments, because it does pertain and bear directly onto the subject at hand of the Great Silence and of how you may cope with establishing the Ascended Master way of life for yourself, the Golden Age of One, and how we together shall bring forth the dawning Golden Age of beloved Saint Germain. For lo and behold, rising into the awareness of the glorious individual mighty I Am presence, once you do understand the nature of that presence, you will realize how necessarily that individual mighty I Am presence should hold connection with its own infinite source, which is none other than the One Presence. This means that each and every ascended master, as well as each and every individual unascended mighty I Am presence, is on a first name basis with the great I Am that I am. They are able to communicate one with the other, to speak to one another, to hear one another, to commune heart to heart, to know of the many dimensions of one another, and to have that intimate sense of identification, of oneness, one with the other. When you then understand, or let us say, share that consciousness of your own individual mighty I Am presence, something dawns on your awareness. And whereas before you thought that there were such things as time and space, that there was such things as outer space that are seemingly empty, that there were such things as inanimate objects, that there was this huge contrasting multiplicity and infinite variety of things that seemingly are disjointed and have no outer connection with one another, all of a sudden you realize that behind the surface of it all, there is one all-pervading, awakened presence that is this allness of the presence of God, that is very much alert and aware. And lo and behold, very much active and engaged in the ongoing work of creation. And out of that dawning discovery, which each heart flame makes for itself, you begin to suspect the infinite possibilities that arise out of this cooperative effort of creation between yourselves as the individual presence and yourself as the one great presence. And you see how all of the coming to be of creation has been born out of the alchemical oneness, the marriage, the synthesis, call it what you will, the interaction between this great universal brooding presence and the setting of that presence into action by the many individualizations of that very presence. Oh, what a magnificent voyage of discovery awaits you when you begin to have vehicles of consciousness, or rather, let us say, when your heart and your four lower bodies are accelerated to where they are able to begin to engulf the awareness that is held at the level of the mighty I Am presence. One of the major aspects of instruction about the nature of this universal presence, as well as the awareness of that presence held by the ascended masters and held by your own mighty I Am presence, is to be found in the glorious invocations of your own beloved Saint Germain, which preceded every one of his many discourses, as well as the concluding benedictions of those. Essentially, in all cases, they are the acknowledgement. They are the open door that affirms the awareness of this great universal presence. Now, before continuing to unfold this panoramic view of that presence, may we also add for your comfort and blessing that when it begins to dawn upon your own wonderful heart, that this presence is active and all-powerful, supremely powerful, and you are able to see the pulsation of that all-pervading presence at work in time and space, and even in this outer appearance world where it appears to be void of that presence. When you realize that it is there, you will personally take heart to realize that ultimately this omnipotent, that is to say, all-powerful presence is far more powerful than all of the forces of the world that seem to be arrayed against that presence, all of the peccadillos of your own personality and so forth. All of those things are so puny and impotent when they are held up against this all-powerful, beneficent presence of love and good that is ever active in the universe. And you will begin to realize that you desire to align yourself, body, soul, spirit, every sinew of your being, you wish to align with that force for good that is ever active in the world, and to slough off anything that would in any way postpone the power of that universal presence from acting in your world, much less abort the wonderful, sensitive, delicate, filigree patterns of creation that your individual mighty I Am presence and this great universal presence are weaving as the tapestry of destiny of your own life stream that is forever unfolding, which is getting us close to the razor's edge of the goal that we have for ourselves in this understanding of the presence, to discover those aspects of our life that allow for this process to occur versus those aspects that would, if permitted, prevent that very process from occurring. Each of us are like a gardener or the husbandman of a vineyard or a farmer who has a field. We all are cultivating creation. We all have this, and we are beginning to realize that the proper environment must be established and set in motion. And when that environment is correctly established and preserved, and the seeds of perfect patterns are sown into that great universal sea of light and life, and then that fragile, formative, delicate, filigree pattern of perfection is insulated against the disintegrating patterns of discord and doubt and fear and all that whole gamut of human creation, is all of that is walled off by the light and is not permitted to impinge upon that perfection that the law mandates. The issuing forth, the coming to be, the genesis of that creation, coming forth full-blown as God is wont to always make it come to pass. Now, we have jumped ahead of ourselves a little bit by pointing out the goal. Let us return for just a few moments to our appreciation of the revelation that has been established now. You have understood it from perhaps the principle of a teaching that you accept on faith. Trust that in the fullness of time, as you first commune with your own Christ presence and rising through the harmony of that Christ presence, as your own individual mighty I Am presence begins more and more to open the doorway of your heart and of your consciousness and share with you the consciousness that your presence has, then you too shall realize firsthand this sublime, magnificent, tangible, palpable, living, breathing, universal presence of God everywhere present. Here are just a few of the ways in which that presence has been described or addressed by the Master. Thou mighty, infinite, radiant one, whose mighty I am presence we bow before. Thou mighty ruler of the universe, we bow before thy all-conquering power and accept fully thy radiant presence. We call to thee that thy presence shall go before us everywhere, mastering all conditions that we may contact and causing us to be the chalice through which thy mighty presence flows forth. Thou mighty, infinite, and majestic presence, we give praise and thanks for the outpouring of thy mighty messengers, for this day when thou hast sent forth these messengers to bless America. We are aware of thy mighty activity, thou mighty God, the One, the Supreme, unfolding through their wondrous individualizations every hour, every day, and drawing near the perfection of truth in every outer activity. Now, as you may wish to do from time to time, you may wish to set aside a lazy, sunny afternoon or maybe a rainy day and go through as an unbroken stream of consciousness many of these invocations, which are really a conversation with the universal presence of God, a conversation that an ascended master is able to conduct and that your own mighty I am presence is able to conduct. And mind you, this is a two-way conversation. For first, the individualization of the presence gives forth its acknowledgement. But then there is the return of that universal presence, affirming and confirming that truth which that individualization has sent forth into the bosom of the great presence. And you will discover that all of the seed ideas that are conceived, presumably originating in the minds of individual ascended masters or cosmic beings, you will discover, as they themselves have always known, that these ideas have an even greater source coming forth from the heart of this one universal presence. The tragedy for most of mankind is that there has been such a long period of a disconnect between their outer awareness and the closedness of their own heart, and this level of reality that for them there is no reverberation or resonance with that level, no feedback to confirm that there is an experience. It is simply a blankness and an emptiness that they feel. And so when constantly they run up in the dark against this solid wall of nothingness as their perceptions is, then they are forced to retreat back and to be satisfied with whatever they can find in the outer world to occupy their lives, to give them some kind of flow of sensory information that is a dubious form of living that goes on and on. But you need not fear that state, that is going to be the estate for you. And once you have begun yourself to experience the exquisite, silky, sublime magnificence of that great universal heart of the presence with its magnificent peace, and that which is known as the great, great silence, which is simultaneously with its so-called silence, still the greatest vibration, the greatest activity, the greatest frequency and intensity, the greatest force. Once you are in that invigorating fierceness of the light, feeling it in every part of your being, there will be such a flow and reinforcement through your world, such a giving and receiving, that all of that frozen part of your life that has been held inert for so many embodiments will melt and wash away. And this joy of the giving and receiving of love and the giving and receiving of all of the magnificence of creation coming back into manifestation will come forth and take its place. The Ascended Masters recognize that there is an absolute crying need for this pressure of the light to come forth into this outer world and to be permanently established as a citadel of light here in this outer world. This must happen because our goal is not escape. Our goal is not a vicarious salvation. Our goal is full God dominion and mastery over these outer worlds. So the light must be brought down and go out into this world and held there while that mastery is attained, while that creation comes to pass. And it is in this manner, this displacement of lesser forces by the forces of the light, it is in this manner that the golden age of one for each of you personally and the dawning golden age of beloved Saint Germain will come forth. You are then coming to a point of understanding that setting up the conditions for that magnificent light known as the Great Silence to come forth out of the still state into the active state, that this needs to take place in order for the progress to occur in your life as well. Is it possible, students of the light, for us to become modern pilgrims and to find somewhere a Plymouth Rock, somewhere outwardly in this outer world, uninhabited thus far, undiscovered by mankind? Can we all band together and sign our Mayflower Compact and agree to this and establish our own land and our own government and hope that the world will leave us alone to have our little Fabergé golden egg, golden age, somewhere in exquisite isolation from the rest of the human race? Is the world likely to leave us alone? Does the world leave you alone, or does it come to your doorstep? Does it find you wherever you seek to go? Is it ebbing and flowing? There is no place outwardly any longer, no more new worlds of a physical nature where we might repair to in order to seek to establish that. That being the case, what is left to the students of the light? What is left is to expand the borders of the kingdom of God wherever we are, and to hold that expansion in a permanent precinct of perfection, to literally expand the electronic light, the electronic circle, until space is hallowed, until the first of those many circles of that electronic circle is the easiest to understand. And that is the circle of your own, the extent of your personal four lower bodies. The extent, the outer edge of your aura, the outer edge of your mind body, your feeling body, your physical body, the outer edge of your memory body. To hold that space in absolute protection against any outer force of imperfection from riding into your world. Now, the Ascended Masters have given you a great deal of instruction about the nature of that electronic circle in establishing that sacred precinct wherein your four lower bodies should be free of any external pressure. And there, within that freedom, to themselves be the expression of the individuality of your beloved mighty I Am Presence. So you have that instruction. You have the understanding of this electronic circle, that not only is it composed of radiation that goes away from the point of center of your heart flame, protecting you from external forces, but that there is an inner facing circle of light and angelic faces, if you will, that are guarding the inner world of your personal untransmuted karma, so that as it comes up for transmutation, it does not discolor the pure stream of your God consciousness, so that you are protected from within as well as from without. So that is certainly each one's own first line of defense, this glorious electronic circle, together with the understanding of the tube of light, which, by the way, is not merely a radiance that comes directly from the mighty I Am Presence down from the electronic body, but you should also have the understanding that when it is safe to do so, that the tube of light is actually more powerfully an action that is produced by your mighty I Am Presence as the light of your presence flows down the crystal cord and out through the pores of your four lower bodies, out through the center of each atom, cell, and electron, the light from within expanding out and really establishing that tube of light as a pillar of light substance that is constantly pouring forth from your heart flame and your crown as from a center. Both of these actions are intended to establish a rolling momentum where there is such a breadth of the presence that is superior in magnitude and force to any external force, so that it keeps the threshing floor of your own four lower bodies swept clear of all debris. Anything less going instantly into the violet transmuting flame. In addition to this, however, you should realize that the purposes of the Brotherhood are not to simply have a few isolated ascensions, few in number by comparison to the many, but rather that we have a collective assignment to anchor the light of the Ascended Master Octave, to anchor the Ascended Master way of life, and to propagate that far and wide across the face of the earth, far beyond just the fingertip edge of the personal aura. And so the same action of the sending forth of that light, of the presence, must go out again and again. You can understand, for example, that to the infinite mind of your individual mighty I Am presence, to the collective mind of the cosmic Christ consciousness, it is just as simple to isolate and pinpoint every person, every place, every condition, everything that is a part of the equation of your personal life and your divine plan, not only in the past and the present, but also in the future. That to the mind of Christ, all of that is subject to the unblinking, all-seeing eye of God and known on the instant and manageable by this divine mind. So that when you set the law into motion, according to the law of your own exercise of your free will, you may call for this displacement of the light, the action of the electronic circle and of the tube of light, and something else that we have yet to discuss, and that is the going forth of the great silence into those conditions, so that every person, place, condition, or thing, known or unknown to your outer consciousness, will be likewise hallowed and protected by the outpouring of the light. Now, as this begins to occur, your own beloved individual mighty I Am presence is freed of the law of octaves, which has hindered its ability to act in these outer worlds because of the misuse of free will in the past. And just as mankind and even the students of the light in the past have prohibited the intervention and the interaction of the light of the presence in the past, now the correct use of free will and engagement with that present liberate the light of that presence. And since we know that that presence is limitless in its capacity, you have turned the tables on those conditions, and you may have the sense of a sun streaming forth without any limit whatsoever, streaming forth through all of the earth plane and the intermediate realms of thought and feeling and the memory body of the planetary body, streaming forth the light of that presence and filling everything with the combined union, both of the light of the individual presence and the activation of the universal presence, which is likewise to be found at every one of these points in space. Let us see if we can give you an illustration of this for just a few moments. The first illustration is the example of what is possible in the mental body of the planet. Let us say, for the sake of argument, that you now have the ability to look down upon the mental plane, utilizing the vehicle of your own Christ presence. And you see there, let's take a cubic yard of space in the mental plane, just any random cubic yard. And you would see flowing through that, just like how, if you can imagine, the gamut of different signals that are passing through space right now. What images are passing through this room? What sounds of discordant music are passing through the radio waves, through the television signals, through the microwave radiation, through cell phones? All of that cacophony of the human creation, all of that is all going on simultaneously when it is simply subjected to the mass consciousness of the mortal human race. But it is possible to actually draw down an activity of that which is known as the Buddhic Web, and to use the Buddhic Web like you would use a strainer or a sieve, understanding that the intersections of this web are so fine in texture, but yet so all-powerful, and the radiation of that web is so powerful that it can, when activated, actually wall off all of the reverberation, every single reverberation of human thought and feeling, and insulate that space so that there is not one action of mortal thought and feeling overlaying that virgin space of the mind body. This is where the power of the one presence is revealed. For even though that Buddhic realm, that Buddhic web, is able to wall off the reverberations of the earth, the water, and the air, it itself is of the Buddhic realm, whereas the reverberations of the one presence are at the level of the God flame and of the great central sun, hence of a more fine radiation frequency, texture, call it what you will, than even this walled off Buddhic web. So while the mortal has been eliminated, the immortal, universal, regular patterns of the presence have not. So now you have a laboratory, sanitary environment in which to observe the action of the presence. And you will realize that there is a breathing of that space, that it has a native purity and innocence and sacredness and holiness and peace about it, that it is palpably alive, and that it is part of the universal body of God. And there are several regular patterns about it. We're not going to go into the many variations of those regular patterns. Suffice it to say that there are several diastolic and systolic out-breath and in-breaths of this pure virgin space of the mental plane. The most important of which are that they are universal and cosmic in scope. And so you are able, no longer do you hear the whole variety of what the TV guide would show you is the programs that are reverberating through space. And for the first time, you hear the strains of the great central sun. You hear the news about what's going on Sirius. You hear this regular, rhythmic giving of the heart of the presence, and you realize that that regular presence, that pulsation has always been going on, unnoticed because of all the overlays that were upon it. but it was there nonetheless. And furthermore, without those regular pulsations, all of the other noise of human misqualification could not have had any form of a parasite existence if it had not been able to leach off of this pure light of the presence, which was there all along. This then opens for you a realization of your path to your freedom. For you realize that you've got a real clear choice. You can align yourself with the presence of God, the One, the motive force of love that governs all of the universe, and rise into the creative aspect of your own individual mighty I Am presence and live in that world, operate according to its principles and order and harmony and givingness, or you can slip back into the littleness and meanness of the outer self. Seeing that choice so very clearly, you are sure to have the wisdom and the reinforcement to know that for you, there really are no longer two choices, but there is only the law of your being as the individuality of the presence, whom you know to be your true self and your true source. And you discover that it is incumbent upon you to create and problem solve as God has always created. As the Ascended Masters sooner or later have discovered that all of the shortcut compromises, the expediencies of mortal problem solving, only exacerbate a problem, maybe postponing the repercussions a little while, but making it worse nonetheless in all cases. So you decide that you will follow along with the way in which the presence does all of these things. Now, while we still have our acre of God's pristine substance protected from the incursion of mortal consciousness, there is one other aspect of it that becomes very, very wonderful and meaningful. And that is to realize that while it is a calm bed of quiescent silence and harmony in its essence, that as the presence addresses that light, there comes out of it the light and power, the dazzling, dancing, what has been called the panoply of the Christos. It doesn't just stay in that innermost quiescent state, but when the conscious cosmic Christ command is applied and spoken into that great silence, lo and behold, it responds, for that is its very reason for being, to bring forth. So you find that the silence gathers, that the silence gives of itself and comes forth according to the creative visualization and qualification of feeling and so forth, the power of the spoken word that have been imposed upon it. This too relates to our central issue of expanding the borders of God's kingdom in this world, expanding and hallowing space, hallowing levels of consciousness so that the presence may enter in. Beloved Saint Germain shared an initiation which he had during the final cycles prior to his own ascension in the light. He explains that his own great teacher, the great divine director, had been instructing him on the theoretical power of the great silence and of how It could be drawn about one as a cloak of invisibility and invincibility and invulnerability. And the master, our master, Saint Germain, agreed that in laboratory conditions, away from the buffeting of the outer world, that seemed to be a very accurate description of this working of this great silence. Then the great divine director recommended that the master, our master Saint Germain, locate himself where two opposing armies were clashing together in mortal combat, and to there draw forth this cloak of invisibility and invincibility around himself. And Saint Germain explained that this strained his own faith to the limit, to where, not doubting the master, but doubting his own capacities, he questioned the master as to whether or not he could actually demonstrate that power. However, the great divine director said, I think you can. And so with that admonishment, Saint Germain did as he was invited. And he said that he discovered that in the seemingly empty spaces all around him, there was this gathering of this substance that more and more wove about him a pattern of tremendous light that held his own immediate force field protected. He gives credit to the great divine director for having been invisibly visible by his side, helping him more than he might have outwardly been aware. But he also went on to say that that was one of the final experiences that his life stream required in order to fully set the operation of the law into action, to where, having demonstrated it, he knew that it worked. And this enabled his own mind and his own feelings to really be the expression of his own I am presence and his heart flame on more than a theoretical basis, so that the power of that presence could come all the way through to the physical realm. For each of you, these wonderful excursions into the sublime consciousness of the presence will truly be like getting onto the Mayflower and journeying out of the old world and into the new. They are experiences that are absolutely priceless when it comes to your path of initiation, and even the practical problem solving of your outer life. For the time will come when the inner life and the outer world, you will bring those two together and make them one cohesive world, all held within the grip of the glorious, mighty I Am Presence. So in addition to the mechanism of the electronic circle, and in addition to the mechanism of the glorious tube of light, you now, in the Temple of the Presence, have been empowered to understand, at least to some level, the action of what is known as the Buddhic Web of life. Let us examine this Buddhic web in its ability to also expand the borders of God's kingdom, to build for you, as it were, a temple of the presence, to establish for you a personal garden of Eden. one of the most comforting things to understand about the Buddhic web of life is that not only does it operate in the realm of the cosmic Christ, this realm of the sun behind the sun of Hyperion that begins in the heart of the sun behind the sun of Helios and Vesta and extends well beyond the outermost planets of our solar system. Not only is that Buddhic web operative in that realm of perfection, which is the homeland of your own Christ presence. Of course, there, everything is perfect and part of that one great infinite web of life. But the great comfort is in knowing that it is not only there and that extension in that inner realm, but that there is a pattern of that Buddhic realm, of this Buddhic web of life, that is the underpinnings of all of creation in the mental, in the emotional, and in the physical world. It is there as the design and the structure of all of these outer planes as well, in ways that you might not understand for quite a long time. It is not only a form of a web that you might conceive of as infinitely fine filigree patterns of light, which it is that, yes, but you must also remember that flowing along this Buddhic web, there are forces of life and light and consciousness that are more powerful than the forces that hold the atom together and hold matter together. There are forces flowing along that Buddhic web in all of these realms. And this means that it not only can control, as it were, what your mind would understand as elements of matter, the mental body or the emotional body, but also that it is able to control forces of life, fohat, forces of electricity, forces of vitality and prana. All of these, likewise, are actually subject to the consciousness of the cosmic Christ that utilizes the Buddhic web the way your personal outer consciousness uses your physical form. So there is this tracing of this Buddhic web that is actually underpinning and undergirding the mental, the emotional, and the physical world. And as in the book of Genesis, where all of creation that God made is described as very good, in just that manner, you might understand that really and truly, this web of life is always there, present in its perfect original pattern, as created by the presence of the Godhead. And that here and there have been pressures applied to it of mortal thought and feeling that have distended and distorted that perfect pattern. They have displaced it and moved it out of the way. And now what is happening is you are in agreement with your presence, with the cosmic Christ consciousness, that those perfect patterns shall once again come into your life. And it means that there is a lifting off of those causes and effects of karma that created the distortion in the first place. And once more, those perfect patterns are able to assert themselves and take their dominion where they need to be. There is immense power in this Buddhic web for you to understand. And we'll just take two examples of it in the time that remains to us today. The first is its ability to throw out a force of light and energy that is an absolute barrier to human consciousness. This is priceless beyond all words. It means that you need not be beset by any form of the oppression of the astral plane or the deception of the psychic world. Where there has been a rupturing of the astral and the psychic, the astral being of the emotional plane and the psychic being the perversions in the mental plane, where there has been a rupturing of this Buddhic web, it means that there have been a tearing of this protection, such that the consciousness is no longer the consciousness of that person is no longer free of the oppression of that energy. It manifests for some as a feeling of dread, of a sense of impending doom or gloom that is nameless but is always haunting the consciousness. For others, it's delirium tremens of an alcoholic stupor. For others, it is a rupture that has been produced by one form of the abuse of drugs, hallucinogenics, and others, that has opened the chakras not into the ascended master realms or the realms of the cosmic Christ, but into these intermediate realms. And there's been a flow back of the horrific discord of those realms into the consciousness of the individual. And so those individuals who have that doorway have opened have no ability through their free will to close it. And it means that they are constantly subject to a host of pressures that are forever interrupting whatever impulses their heart flame might wish to send forth. Now you are on the path to your ascension, and we are on the very deliberate resolution of the Great Commission to bring the work of the Brotherhood of Light to the world as outlined in the Great Commission. And for us, this Buddhic web is not only the protection of our individual chakras, but it is the protection of all of the karmic conditions and the projects of the ascended masters and the need to roll back that entirety of the emotional and the mental plane and to establish a citadel of that light, of that Buddhic web, walling off everything that is less than that perfection, so that within the precincts of that which has been cleansed of that imperfection, there may come forth the building of the golden age. It may come forth into manifestation. In this regard, you will be joyous to know that one of the most important services that is rendered by the life stream who holds the office of Lord of the world is to reinforce this Buddhic web of structure, patterns of perfection, and protection for every heart flame who has ratified that with their hearts. This blessing cannot, under any circumstances, be overstated in its importance. For it means that there is a direct, unmitigated connection between your heart flame and that of Gautama Buddha, the Lord of the world. And the authority of that Lord of the world is transferred like a spark that leaps across the gap from his heart to your heart. And there is a reinforcement of the authority of that Lord of the world and of the cosmic Christ consciousness to once more establish in this outer world the borders of God consciousness, the borders of the kingdom of God, however the metaphor fits for you. For us, we call it the temple of the mighty I Am presence, the borders of the temple of the presence, the area in which God may walk as God walked in the Garden of Eden in the cool of the morning and in the mellow, magical hour before the sunset, walking and talking with his firstborn and only begotten. All of this occurring within this Buddhic web, within this citadel of protection that is to be established round about you. As this is established, it liberates your own beloved mighty I Am presence. Let's back up for just a moment. By definition, this Buddhic web of light has screened out mortal consciousness, has displaced it, it's moved it out of the way, but it hasn't removed our heart flame, and it hasn't removed our mind-body substance in its own virginal nature or our feeling world in its pristine nature, but it has allowed those bodies to be free of the weight of oppression, of either personal karma or of world oppression. And that means that our own individual mighty I Am presence is free to qualify the stream of feeling, qualify the stream of mind, qualify action, word, deed, attention, to qualify that with the Ascended Master way of life, with the mighty I Am presence, and for that glorious electronic body to exert its unbounded, limitless light through the chalice of the four lower bodies. As that occurs in your individual life, where you begin to feel that there is this veritable sun, it may have the form of a masculine or feminine glorious being, but it is shining with the self-luminosity of the sun. To have the sense that that is streaming, shining, always going forth, probing and rolling back everything less than itself, and the fingers of that divine consciousness are then molding and shaping and creating within that hallowed precinct after the divine design. Here is the way in which beloved Saint Germain explained it still further on various other occasions. When first you begin to fashion a form in the pure ethers of the mental body, that will be as delicate as a gossamer veil. What to compare it to? Maybe nothing more substantial than a soap bubble, like a child might blow in space. Imagine a diaphanous soap bubble. How vulnerable that is, how fragile, how subject to the buffeting of wind or other sharp motions. Even so, when alchemy is taking place within the crucible of a life stream, every nuance of thought and feeling is either contributing, if it's harmonious, to the crystallization of that, or it is assaulting that very thing, that very fragile and vulnerable pattern with discord. And that discord is going to shatter the form and scatter the substance. And the life stream is not going to be able to create or benefit from that creation. Well, in this case, by having re-educated the palette of your desire body to know the flow of harmony and peace and of the great silence, having educated the mind to value the perfect patterns and the radiance, the inspiration of the divine thought of the I Am Presence, to where that is meat and drink and life to you. Once that is true, you will be content to sit beneath the vine and fig tree of that glorious presence and have that presence create at your command or with your identification with that presence. And the problem-solving way of the ascended masters, via the use of the light, via the power of love going forth. All of these things can have the opportunity to demonstrate themselves in their fullness to you. So the blessing of a spiritual alliance with the Lord of the world. And in this regard, it will be so very helpful for you to remind yourself that, like the Chohans of the rays, we are very aware that the Chohans work and move with unascended mankind. Even so, the Lord of the world, who by his very office is obliged to hold conscious connection with the heart flames of every life stream upon the planet. We understand the nature of the etheric retreat at Shambhala to be so very close to the physical realm, forming an alliance with the Lord of the world and his ability to roll forth that Spirit of God consciousness so that you are free to have that action of the Buddhic Web insulating every part of space where it is lawful. And in this case, you don't need to ask the question, well, is it going out 12 feet or 15 feet or whatever? The important thing is to remember anything that impacts your life, directly or indirectly, may lawfully be enveloped in that Buddhic Web and that electronic circle action, now reinforced by the intertwining of your own heart flame, where the blue plume of your heart flame has ratified the desire for this life with the heart of Lord Gautama. The golden plume has merged with the mind of your presence, and the pink plume has discovered this brooding universal presence that is everywhere present. So as that takes place, it begins to show how here in the year 2010, regardless of what is going on the TV screen, in the newspapers, regardless of the reports of the senses, that of the 5 physical senses that report back to you all manner of things, you will come to the point where instead of those things attaching themselves to your attention and your life feeding into the reinforcement of those appearances, you will be able to look behind the appearance and see there and there and there and there and there and wherever it is, and affirm, I am this dazzling white light of the great silence, the grip of the great silence, coming forth out of that quiescent state and holding all of this in the firm grip of the mind of God in the hand of the presence of that one presence. This is the power of the great, great silence. Probably many of you have had a variation on a dream that is familiar or particular to most individuals. And that is the one where you're trying to fly or run fast or do something, and no matter how fast you try to go, it's like your feet are stuck in molasses. You can't move. even though you're trying to. In this case, your visualization is that the universal presence, which is so much more omnipotent and all-powerful than the entire human race put together back to the fall of mankind, that great silence comes forth and holds all of that still, arrests all of that action. While that is held still, then the light, the dazzling white light, comes forth out of that great silence, displaces every lesser perfection. And this is done by the authority of the mighty I Am Presence, whom you are. This you may do because the threefold flame of your mighty I Am Presence is incarnated in the earth, in the unascended life stream, whom you are. And hence your own mighty I Am Presence has taken incarnation and has the authority, because its heart flame is in the earth, has the authority to speak that on behalf of the entire human race and the entire human condition, and hold that glorious presence going forth in the fullness of that perfection. And as we give that call, certainly our own personal worlds will be taken care of. That's kind of a given. But more importantly, we will reverse the momentum and put the momentum in favor of the sons and daughters of God and the children of the light, and this glorious, mighty presence coming forth across the face of the earth. So I am going to invite you now to stand and give together the call of beloved Jesus, the great silence call. I believe it's on page 78. Please stand. Now, as we give this call, we are first and foremost aware of this all-pervading one presence, everywhere present. We have a choice. We can focus our attention. You know, if you're in a room, or if you're on a mirror, if you're looking at a mirror, you can change the focal length of your attention. You can look to the foreground and bring the foreground into focus, or you can look to the middle ground, or you can look to the horizon. Focus your attention at any one of those levels. Likewise, you can focus your attention on the top of the waves of human experience, the dancing waves of Maya. You can focus your attention there, chew your fingernails to the bone if you wish, but it won't help you or the world at all. Or you can shift the focus of your attention from that to what you now know your mighty I Am Presence is in constant contact with, which is the universal presence that is the foundation of all of that outer froth. And you can put your attention on that source, or that foundation, that white fire core, and that's where the great silence is. You can hold that great silence to be everywhere present and holding the entire accumulation of this little world we call Earth, holding it all in the grip of that great silence and giving power to that, to have that presence take dominion.